Never do human beings speculate so widely or have more opinions than about things they do not understand. Carl Jung. From early childhood, Carl Jung encountered strange, seemingly inexplicable phenomena. He feared he was going mad and embarked on a quest to understand what they meant. I saw yellow waves, floating ruins, and the deaths of countless thousands of people. 2 weeks later, the vision returned, even more intense than before, and an inner voice declared, "Look at it. It is completely real, and it will happen. Do not doubt it." These vivid visions appeared to Jung shortly before the outbreak of the First World War. When it occurred, he was certain that no schizophrenia threatened him. He realized that his dreams and visions came to him from the depths of the collective unconscious. Driven by the pressing question of how such meaningful events, unconnected by any visible causal chains, were possible, what did this say about the physical universe? These were astonishing coincidences that scientific rationality could not adequately explain. In his youth, Jung experienced not only unusual visions but also events that defied any explanation. During summer holidays, Jung was studying books and heard a sound like a pistol shot. About 2 weeks later, he heard another sound. This time, he saw that a bread knife, which had been used shortly before, was lying in a cupboard, broken into several pieces. Jung completed his medical education and became a psychiatrist. During this time, he attended seances to communicate with the deceased and developed an interest in parapsychology and occultism, largely due to his personal experiences. This formed the basis of his medical dissertation, published in 1902, titled On the Psychology and Pathology of So-Called Occult Phenomena. One day, Jung was discussing parapsychology with Freud. Freud, being a materialist, dismissed most of Jung's questions as nonsense. Jung experienced a strange sensation, as if his diaphragm were made of iron and glowing red hot. At that moment, a loud noise came from a bookcase standing right beside them, startling both men, who jumped up, fearing it might collapse on them. Jung said to him, "This is an example of the so-called catalytic exteriorization phenomenon." Freud replied that it was utter nonsense. Jung insisted it was not, and to prove his point, predicted that another such sound would occur in a moment. Another explosion came from the bookcase. Jung wrote, "To this day, I do not know what gave me this certainty, but I knew beyond all doubt that the noise would come again." Freud merely stared at me in astonishment. I do not know what was on his mind or what that look meant. In 1928, while Jung was drawing mandalas featured in his Red Book, sinologist Richard Wilhelm sent him a copy of The Secret of the Golden Flower, a Taoist alchemical book of life that teaches an ancient Chinese meditative practice for achieving wholeness. Jung was struck by the parallelism between the Chinese mandala and the one he was working on, and he immediately devoured the book. Recalling this event, he wrote, "In 1928, when I was painting this picture depicting a golden, well-fortified castle, Richard Wilhelm from Frankfurt sent me a 1,000-year-old Chinese text about the Yellow Castle, the germ of the immortal body." This was a pivotal moment in Jung's life, when his work began to emphasize the psychological significance of alchemy. He wrote, "From Wilhelm came a spark that ignited a light, which became one of the most significant events in my life. Indeed, I feel so enriched by it that it seems I received far more from him than from any other person." Jung was particularly struck by a drawing depicting a yogi with 5 human figures growing from his crown, and another 5 figures growing from the crown of each of those heads. Jung believed this image represented the spiritual state of a yogi preparing to shed their multiple egos and transition into a fuller, more objective state of the self. Jung coined the term synchronicity and first publicly mentioned it in 1930 in his memorial address for Richard Wilhelm, who also translated the I Ching, or Book of Changes. He called it a special principle operating in the world so that things somehow happen together and behave as if they were one and the same, yet to us they are not. Here, synchronicity plays a crucial role in individuation. There is no linear evolution, only a circular one where everything is connected to the center. This is represented by the symbol of the mandala. According to Jung, finding one's own mandala symbol is critical to the development of the self. For circular motion to occur, a symbol, such as the sun, a castle, or a golden flower, must reside at the center of the mandala. This is a visual image of the divine pattern, a manifestation of the self. The result is an alchemical procedure, Mysterium Coniunctionis. This is the title of Jung's final major work. It involves an elevation and awakening of consciousness and a deepening sense of the unity of being. Jung notes that Atman and Tao are different cultural symbols of wholeness that connect the inner I with the animating principle of the cosmos. Now it is not you who live, but it lives through you. The predictions of the I Ching played a significant role in the development of his concept of synchronicity. He used it in his therapy and recalled numerous meaningful responses and remarkable psychological insights. For example, he recounts the story of a patient suffering from a mother complex who feared that his future spouse might be domineering. Jung consulted the I Ching and received the 44th hexagram, titled Coming to Meet, which stated, "The maiden is powerful. One should not marry such a maiden." Jung's experiments showed that there are meaningful connections between the psychic realm and the physical world. He wrote, "For over 30 years I have been interested in this oracular technique or method of exploring the unconscious, as it has proven extraordinarily significant to me. It is linked to a curious principle that I have called synchronicity, a concept that formulates a point of view diametrically opposed to that of causality. Since the latter is merely a statistical truth and not absolute, it represents a kind of working hypothesis about how events evolve from one another. In contrast, synchronicity considers the coincidence of events in space and time as something more than mere chance. Causality is a way to explain the connection between two successive events. A cause, striking a billiard ball with a cue, results in the ball moving. Synchronicity, however, is a meaningful coincidence of external and internal events that cannot be linked by causality. This occurs when an internally perceived event, a dream, vision, premonition, thought, or mood, finds a reflection in external reality. The inner image comes true. The inner and outer worlds align, filling your life with meaning. Synchronicity comes from the Greek prefix syn, together, and chronos, time. It refers to existence or occurrence at the same time. Synchrony is not just an unusual coincidence, but rather a meaningful coincidence of two or more events. The problem of synchronicity long puzzled Jung. While exploring the phenomena of the collective unconscious, he constantly encountered coincidences so meaningfully connected that they defied all statistical probabilities. We cannot conceive of events that are connected without cause and capable of a non-causal explanation, but that does not mean such events do not exist. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Wolfgang Pauli underwent therapy with Carl Jung and shared many of his dreams. The outstanding quantum physicist, who, as it turned out, had ambiguous dreams, was an extraordinary find. After ceasing to be a patient, he continued corresponding with Jung. This is documented in the book Atom and Archetype, which contains the letters of Pauli and Jung. Through their joint efforts, they concluded that synchronicity is a causal principle that transcends space, time, and causality. Nearly 20 years passed before they could publish their groundbreaking, controversial ideas. In 1952, Jung and Pauli published a joint volume, The Interpretation of Nature and the Psyche. Later, Jung's contribution, Synchronicity, and a causal connecting principle, was published in the 8th volume of his collected works. He wrote, "As a psychiatrist and psychotherapist, I have often encountered observed phenomena and could convince myself how much these inner experiences meant to my patients. In most cases, these were things people do not talk about, fearing unfounded ridicule. I was struck by how many people had such experiences and how carefully they guarded the secret." Jung lacked the necessary means to conduct scientific experiments to study synchronicity. He refers to the experiments of Joseph Rhine, who founded parapsychology as a branch of psychology. The experiments demonstrate a causal combinations of events where the random coincidence represents a degree of improbability that would have to be expressed by an astronomical figure. For example, in a card experiment consisting of 25 cards with 5 different symbols, the subject, separated by a screen from the experimenter, had to guess the cards 800 times. One young man who, across numerous experiments, averaged 10 correct guesses per 25 cards, double the expected number, once correctly guessed all 25 cards. This yields a probability of approximately 1 in 298 quadrillion. Jung did not aim to fully describe and explain these complex phenomena, but rather sought to open up an obscure area that, from a philosophical perspective, holds the greatest significance. His interest in this issue was not merely scientific. The main thing is that he strives to penetrate the very human soul. Jung attempted to explain synchronous events primarily through his concept of archetypes, which represent a model of instinctual behavior responsible for organizing unconscious psychic processes. Archetypes form the structure of the collective unconscious, which is a psyche inherent to all people and contains images of all creation. This is the main pattern of life. Archetypes organize psychic material and create meaningful patterns in the physical world. They cannot be directly perceived or represented, unlike tangible psychic phenomena. Due to their implicit nature, Jung called them psychoid, soul-like, relating to the connections between a person's psyche and the physical world beyond their body. We encounter a factor that has nothing to do with brain activity, but rather with meaningful patterns in our personal lives. Meaningful coincidences rely on an archetypal foundation. Synchronicity is the deepest layer of archetypal reality, where psyche and matter collide and become indistinguishable. This is the unified dimension of all experience. The alchemical concept of unus mundus, one world. Jung writes, if the symbolism of the mandala is the psychological equivalent of unus mundus, then synchronicity is its parapsychological equivalent. Psychological life is the self-expression of nature. In that case, we must assume the existence of knowledge that precedes all consciousness. It is believed that synchronous phenomena arise from the activation of this level of reality. It seems there is an a priori, causally inexplicable knowledge of a situation that is unknowable at the given moment. In therapy, perceiving one person as radically separate from another is limiting. The transformative element is the field that connects and includes both participants, the unconscious communications linking both partners, which can usefully be described as arising from the psychoid sphere, since they transcend limited notions of analyst and patient possessing separate, encapsulated psyches. It is in the heightened tension created by such a field that synchronous events typically occur. Psychic life is inherently a shared unitary sphere. The fullness of the I is the pleroma, a place where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. This is the idea that everything that will happen has already happened. This is the magic of synchronicity. Jung tells the story of the 19th century French poet Émile Deschamps, who was given a piece of plum pudding by a certain Monsieur de Fortgibou. 10 years later, he discovered another plum pudding in a Paris restaurant and asked if he could have a piece. However, it turned out that the plum pudding had already been ordered by de Fortgibou. Many years later, Deschamps was invited to taste plum pudding. The event itself was a rarity. While eating it, he remarked that the only thing missing was Monsieur de Fortgibou. At that moment, the door opened, and an old, frail man in the final stages of disorientation entered. It was de Fortgibou who had mistaken the address and stumbled into the party by mistake. Jung writes about what seemed to him a synchronous event. On the morning of April 1st, 1949, I made a note describing a figure that was half human, half fish. Fish was served for lunch. Someone mentioned the custom of making someone an April fish. In France, this expression refers to something like an April Fool's prank. He continues, "After lunch, a former patient, whom I hadn't seen for months, showed me some impressive photographs of fish. In the evening, I was shown a piece of embroidery with sea monsters and fish. The next morning, I saw a former patient who came to me for the first time in 10 years. The previous evening, she had dreamed of a large fish. A few months later, when I was using this story for a larger work and was finishing writing it, I approached a spot by the lake in front of the house where I had already been several times that morning. This time, a fish about a foot long was lying on the shore. Since no one else was around, I have no idea how the fish could have gotten there. When coincidences pile up in this way, it cannot fail to impress. However, Jung doubts whether this is synchronicity, as there was no interaction with the inner world. According to him, this could well be an extremely improbable random combination of 6 events, with a 7th occurring several months later. Jung also warns that synchronicity can be misused or interpreted in a pathological sense. People can become overly absorbed and start perceiving every event as meaningful. Jung commented on this in connection with situations where patients, especially schizophrenics, interpret events as having special relevance to them. He wrote in one of his letters, "I have often found that synchronous experiences were interpreted by schizophrenics as hallucinations. Since archetypal experiences are not uncommon in schizophrenia, we must also assume that corresponding synchronous phenomena will occur just as they do in so-called normal people. The schizophrenic's interpretation is painfully narrow, as it is mainly limited to the intentions of others and their own ego significance. We must try to discern what the unconscious is thinking and adjust our relationships accordingly. Thus, the synchronous effect should not be perceived as psychosis but as a normal phenomenon." Once, Jung, together with participants in a dream analysis seminar, discussed the symbol of the bull god in connection with a patient's dream. Unaware of the discussions in the seminar group, the patient, over several days, created an image of a bull with a sun disk between its horns. On another occasion, Jung wrote, "For example, I am walking with a patient in the woods. She tells me about the first dream in her life that made an indelible impression on her. In her parents' house, she saw a ghostly fox descending the stairs. At that moment, a real fox emerged from behind the trees, a few yards away from us, and calmly walked along the path ahead of us for several minutes. The animal behaved as if it were a human companion. The fox is a symbol of instinctual intelligence that prompted the woman to set aside her hesitations and overcome intellectual blocks. By trusting her instinctual wisdom, it would show her the right path." Jung provides another example related to synchronicity. "I recall the story of a student friend. His father promised him a trip to Spain if he passed his final exams satisfactorily. After that, my friend dreamed he was walking through a Spanish city. The street led him to a square where a Gothic cathedral stood. Then he turned right around a corner onto another street. There, an elegant carriage drawn by 2 cream-colored horses met him. Then he woke up. He told us about this dream while we were sitting at a table drinking beer. Shortly afterward, having successfully passed his exams, he went to Spain and recognized the city from his dream on one of its streets. He found the square and the cathedral which exactly matched the images from his dream. He wanted to go straight to the cathedral, but then remembered that in the dream, he had turned right around the corner onto another street. Curiosity got the better of him, wondering if his dream would be confirmed. After walking a little further and turning the corner, he saw a carriage with 2 cream-colored horses on the street. According to Jung, the sensation of déjà vu is based on foresight in a dream, which can occur in a waking state. Thus, chance becomes extremely improbable, as the coincidence is known in advance. Jung recounts the story of one of his patients whom he had pulled out of depression. The patient's wife had placed an unbearable burden on him, which he was unable to cope with. After a year of marriage, he fell into a new depression. Jung wanted to visit him and asked about it, but due to his wife's influence, the patient did not respond. At that time, Jung returned to his hotel at midnight after a lecture. He wrote, "Around 2 a.m., I must have just fallen asleep. I woke up with a start and the feeling that someone had entered the room. It even seemed to me that the door had been hurriedly opened. I immediately turned on the light, but there was nothing. Perhaps someone got the wrong door, I thought, and looked into the corridor. There wasn't a soul in sight. Strange, I thought. Someone definitely entered this room. Then I tried to remember exactly what had happened, and I realized I had woken up with a strange sensation, as if there was a dull pressure on both my forehead and the back of my head. The next day he received a telegram with heartbreaking news. His patient had passed away. Later he learned that the circumstances matched what he had felt in his sleep, details he couldn't have possibly known in advance. This synchronicity was observed in connection with an atypical situation, in this case, a death. Jung perceived something temporal and spatial that was actually happening elsewhere. In this instance, the unconscious knew about the patient's condition. Perhaps the most famous example of synchronicity for Jung is the scarab, an important Egyptian symbol representing rebirth and transformation. Jung found it challenging to work with a patient who was psychologically inaccessible. She was extremely rational and did not believe in anything related to the unconscious. Jung wrote, "A young woman I was treating, at a difficult moment, had a dream in which she was given a golden scarab. While she was telling me this dream, I was sitting with my back to a closed window. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me like a gentle tapping. Turning around, I saw a flying insect knocking against the window pane from the outside. I opened the window and caught the creature in the air as it flew in. It was the closest thing to a golden scarab one could find in our latitudes, a scarabaeid beetle, Cetonia aurata, the rose chafer, which, contrary to its usual habits, apparently felt an urge to enter a dark room at that very moment. I must admit that nothing like this had ever happened to me before or since, and the patient's dream remained unique in my experience. This seems to suggest that anomalous, random phenomena can occur during the awakening of vital needs or impulses. Jung handed the creature to his patient, saying, 'Here is your scarab.' This experience broke the ice of her intellectual resistance. It helped her connect with her emotions and had a transformative effect on her, linking her dream world with her waking life. The naive ego died, giving birth to a new I. Jung uses these examples merely as a paradigm of countless instances of meaningful coincidences observed not only by him but by many others and documented in extensive records. Synchronies accompany the most critical phases of the individuation process, but too often they go unnoticed because people have not learned to observe such coincidences and give them meaning in connection with the symbolism of their inner lives. Pay attention to events in your life that may seem random, and see what meaning they might hold if you allow them to linger within you for a while. Synchronicity is a way to become aware of what lies in our deepest unexpressed I. In 1961, Jung had just completed his final work, Man and His Symbols, an approach to the unconscious, prompted by dreams that urged him to make his work accessible to the general public. 3 days before his death, he had several dreams. The last one that reached us was, he dreamed he was on a high place, surrounded by a stone boulder under the rays of the sun. On it were carved the words, "Take this as a symbol of the wholeness you have achieved and the solitude you have become." In another dream, he saw a plain with trees growing on it. The roots of the trees were interwoven with gold, a symbol of determination, an alchemical symbol of wholeness. The collective unconscious seemed to tell him, "You have earned the freedom to move forward. You have done your work. You have done it well, and it will bear fruit." Shortly before Jung's death, his friend Laurens van der Post, traveling from Africa to Europe, dreamed that Jung was waving goodbye. Nature embraced him, and a few hours later a thunderstorm roared and lightning struck one of Jung's favorite trees in the garden where he often sat. Several years later, van der Post was filming a documentary in Jung's house in Zurich. When the moment came to speak directly to the camera about Jung's death, and he described how lightning had destroyed Jung's favorite tree, lightning struck again in the garden. Synchronicity is an omnipresent reality for those who can see.